When Marcus said those words, "This house is ours now, Dad. You should be grateful," I felt the floorboards beneath my feet, remembering how each plank had cost me 12 hours of overtime. The wood grain under my socks held more of my life than he'd ever understand. I nodded, said nothing, let them believe they'd won. 3 weeks later, on Thanksgiving morning, they would learn the difference between ownership and earning the right to something. The screams that echoed through these walls that day still make me smile. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. That Tuesday started like any other. I was fixing the kitchen faucet, again, when Marcus walked in with Jennifer trailing behind. She had that look she gets when she's about to ask for money, but this time felt different. Heavier. "Dad, we need to talk." Marcus leaned against the counter I'd installed 5 summers ago, back when he still called me for help with everything. I wiped my hands on the towel, watching water droplets fall into the sink. Such a simple thing. Fixing a leak. You identify the problem, you replace what's broken, you test it until it works. If only families were that straightforward. "Jennifer's pregnant," he announced. My chest should have filled with joy, my first grandchild. Instead, I felt something cold settle in my stomach because of how he said it. Not like good news, like a business proposition. "Congratulations." I meant it, despite everything. Jennifer stepped forward, her hand already resting on her still flat belly. "We've been thinking about space, about what's best for the baby." The words came slowly, methodically. They'd been planning this conversation. How I needed to understand that young families require stability. How this house, my house, had so much room going to waste. How it would be selfish of me to keep it all to myself when they could make such good use of it. I listened, my fingers still gripping that wrench. 43 years I'd lived in these walls. 43 years of mortgage payments, repairs, improvements. The garden I'd planted when Marcus was 8 and wanted to grow tomatoes. The deck I'd built by hand when he graduated high school and wanted space for parties. "You've done enough, Dad," Marcus said, and for a second I thought he meant something kind. "You can relax now. Let us handle things." That's when Jennifer produced the papers. Legal documents transferring property ownership. Already prepared, signatures ready. "It's really the smart thing," she explained while I stared at my name typed at the bottom. "You're getting older. Maintenance is expensive. This way, you don't have to worry about anything." The house suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in, squeezing the air from my lungs. I thought about the 17 years I'd worked 2 jobs to pay off the mortgage early. The weekends spent painting, fixing, building every corner of this place into something worthy of the family photos that lined the hallways. "Where would I live?" I asked. "The garage has potential." Jennifer said brightly, "We could convert it, make it really nice for you." The garage, where I kept my tools, my workbench, everything that represented what I could build with my own hands. They wanted to turn me into a tenant in my own creation. I set down the wrench and looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he stopped being the boy who used to help me with projects, who'd bring me lemonade when I worked in the yard? When had he become this stranger who saw me as an obstacle to clear away? Why? The word came out rougher than I intended. Marcus exchanged a glance with Jennifer, like they'd rehearsed this part too. "Dad, you're 62. You should be enjoying retirement, not worrying about property taxes and broken pipes." I almost laughed. Retirement. On what money? The savings account I'd emptied for his wedding? The retirement fund I'd cashed out to pay for Jennifer's failed boutique venture? "I'm not signing anything," I said quietly. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Jennifer's smile faltered, and Marcus straightened up like I'd slapped him. "Dad, be reasonable." Reasonable? The word tasted bitter, like it was reasonable when you needed $43,000 for Jennifer's store. Or when I co-signed your car loan after you wrecked the first one. Or when I paid for your wedding because you spent the money on a honeymoon to Europe. My mind drifted back to that wedding day. Standing in my only good suit, the one I'd worn to Sarah's funeral 3 years earlier, watching Marcus dance with his new wife while I calculated how many extra shifts it would take to cover the venue costs. I'd been so proud that day, seeing him happy. Now I wondered if he'd been planning this even then. "That's different," Jennifer snapped, her mask slipping. That was helping family. And what's this? Marcus stepped between us, his jaw tight. This is securing our future, the baby's future. You've had your time in this house, Dad. Now it's our turn. Our turn. Like my life was a game with innings and I'd used up all my swings. I remembered the night Sarah died. Marcus hadn't even come to the hospital. Too busy, he'd said. Work conference. I'd held her hand alone while machines beeped around us, and when the nurses asked about next of kin, I'd still defended him. He's a good boy, I'd whispered, just busy building his life. Your mother loved this house, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Mom's gone, Dad. Marcus's words hit like a physical blow. You can't live in the past forever. Jennifer placed her hand on his arm, a gesture that looked supportive but felt possessive. We're not asking you to leave. We're asking you to be part of the solution. The solution. I was the problem now. The inconvenient old man cluttering up their perfect plan. I walked to the window and looked out at the maple tree I'd planted when Marcus was born. 32 years of growth, its branches now reaching the second-story windows. Some things took time to mature. Others apparently never did. I need to think about this, I said. Dad, we need an answer tonight. Marcus's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. The lawyer needs the papers filed by Friday. Tonight. They'd given me until tonight to sign away everything I'd built, everything Sarah and I had dreamed of passing down to our children. I turned back to face them, these strangers wearing familiar faces. Jennifer was checking her phone, already bored with the conversation. Marcus was tapping his foot, impatient to close this deal and move on with his life. I'll give you an answer, I said, walking past them toward the stairs. But not tonight. I climbed each step slowly, feeling their eyes burning into my back. At the top, I paused and looked down at them standing in my foyer under the chandelier I'd hung when they announced their engagement. You should be grateful, Dad, Marcus called up after me. Not everyone gets to simplify their life like this. I closed my bedroom door and sat on the bed Sarah and I had shared for 28 years. The silence felt different now. Not peaceful, predatory. Like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious from this battle I never knew I was fighting. That's when I made my decision. Not the one they expected, but the one they'd earned. The morning after they left, I found myself staring at the coffee maker for 10 minutes before remembering to add water. Simple tasks felt foreign, like I was operating someone else's body. The coffee tasted bitter. Everything did. I kept replaying Marcus's words. You should be grateful, Dad. Grateful for being kicked out of my own life. While I swept the kitchen floor, the same oak planks that matched the rest of the house, my mind wandered to Marcus's 8th birthday. He'd wanted a treehouse, and I'd spent 3 weekends building it, coming home from the plant with sawdust in my hair and splinters in my palms. When it was finished, he'd hugged my legs and said, "You're the best dad ever." The phone rang. Marcus. Dad, I hope you're not overthinking this. It's really a win-win situation. Win-win, like a business deal. I made non-committal sounds while he talked about Jennifer's morning sickness and how they'd already started planning the nursery layout. In my house, in the room where Sarah used to sew. We're thinking soft yellows, he said. Gender neutral, you know? And Jennifer found this amazing crib online. A little pricey, but the baby deserves the best, right? The baby deserves the best. Not the baby deserves what we can afford. I wondered who was paying for this amazing crib. After hanging up, I found myself in Sarah's sewing room, touching the window seat I'd built for her. She'd sit there on Sunday mornings, mending our clothes and watching birds at the feeder. Waste not, want not, she'd say, patching holes in Marcus's jeans instead of buying new ones. Now Jennifer wanted to gut this room for a nursery. Rip out the built-in shelves where Sarah kept her patterns, paint over the soft blue walls we'd chosen together. I was replacing a light bulb in the hallway when the doorbell rang. UPS truck. A package for Jennifer, already being delivered here. Baby furniture, according to the label. I signed for it with steady hands, but my chest felt tight. The return address showed their apartment, but they were having it delivered here. Probably because their landlord didn't allow packages in the hallways, or maybe their building wasn't secure enough for expensive items. Either way, they were already treating my house like their personal warehouse. Standing there with that box in my hands, I remembered how Jennifer always wanted the most expensive version of everything. Even their wedding registry had been ambitious. Crystal stemware we couldn't afford, silver serving pieces that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Sarah had whispered to me at the reception, "That girl's got champagne tastes on a beer budget." We'd bought the most expensive item anyway, a $300 blender that I'd never seen them use. I carried the box inside and set it next to Sarah's reading chair. The contrast was stark. Sleek, modern packaging against worn upholstery that held the shape of my wife's body. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "Did our package arrive? So excited. Our package. In my house." Delivered to my door. I typed back, "Yes, it's here." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Perfect. Marcus will pick it up tonight. We're staying late to look at paint samples." Paint samples for my walls. In my house. I deleted my response 3 times before settling on, "Okay." That evening, while I was checking the furnace filter, I thought about the morning Sarah died. I'd called Marcus from the hospital at 4 a.m., my voice breaking as I told him his mother was gone. His first question wasn't about her suffering or what happened. It was, "Dad, do you need me to handle the funeral arrangements?" At the time, I'd been grateful. Thought he was being considerate. Now I wondered if he'd been calculating the inheritance. Marcus arrived at 7:30, let himself in with his key. He went straight for the box without saying hello. "Dad, you should see the nursery sketches Jennifer drew up. She's really talented at this stuff." I watched him hoist the box, muscles straining. He was strong, had my build when I was his age. Strong enough to carry furniture, strong enough to carry his own weight in the world. Apparently not willing to. "The sketches show built-in storage where Mom's old sewing stuff is," he continued, not meeting my eyes. "Really maximizes the space. Built-in storage. Over Sarah's memory." "I haven't said yes to any of this," I reminded him. Marcus set the box down and looked at me properly for the first time since arriving. "Dad, come on. You know this makes sense. Jennifer's already started nesting. You know how pregnant women get." Nesting. In my nest. What if I said no? The question hung in the air between us. Marcus shifted his weight, suddenly uncomfortable. "Well, you won't, because you love us." Love. He was using my love as leverage, like emotional blackmail with a family discount. I remembered the night he came home from college, freshman year, broke and ashamed. He'd blown his entire semester budget on a spring break trip, couldn't afford books for his finals. I'd given him $800 without hesitation, grateful he'd trusted me enough to ask for help. "You're the best, Dad," he'd said then. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Now I was finding out. After he left with the box, I called my brother Rick in Arizona. We hadn't spoken since Sarah's funeral. "Frank, Jesus, what's wrong?" I told him everything. The house, the papers, the grateful comment. "That little bastard," Rick said, his voice crackling through the distance. "Sarah would roll over in her grave." "I don't know what to do, Rick." "Yeah, you do. You just don't want to do it." He was right. Sitting there in my recliner, the one Marcus said would need to go because it didn't match Jennifer's aesthetic, I knew exactly what needed to happen. I just wasn't sure I had the strength to follow through. But as I pulled out a notepad and started writing, feeling the familiar weight of a pen in my hand, I realized something had shifted. The anger was gone, burned away by something cleaner. Certainty. By the time I went to bed, I knew what Thanksgiving would look like. And for the first time since Tuesday, I slept through the night without dreaming of empty rooms and strangers' voices echoing through my halls. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Marcus called with news. I was in the garage, organizing my tools for the 3rd time that week, a habit I'd developed since retirement, something to keep my hands busy while my mind worked. "Dad, Jennifer's parents confirmed they're flying in from Portland, and my buddy Derek might join us too. You remember Derek from college?" I paused, holding my father's old hammer. I remembered Derek. Loud, entitled, the kind of kid who'd never worked a day in his life but had strong opinions about everyone else's work ethic. The same Derek who'd once told me my trade work was honest labor, in that condescending tone rich kids use when they want to sound respectful. "That's nice," I said, walking to the small window that overlooked the backyard. A squirrel was burying nuts near the oak tree. Smart animal, always preparing for winter. "So we're thinking maybe 12 people total." His voice carried that excited energy I used to love hearing. Jennifer's really excited to host her first big family dinner in the house. There it was. He'd caught himself mid-sentence, but the slip revealed everything. In his mind, this was already their house. I was just the current occupant who hadn't gotten the memo yet. 12 people, I repeated, feeling the cold metal of the hammer handle against my palm. Don't worry about cooking, Dad. Jennifer's got it all planned out. She's even ordering one of those fancy heritage turkeys from that organic place downtown. I could hear the pride in his voice, like he was personally responsible for this extravagance. A heritage turkey. Probably cost 3 times what a regular bird would. The irony wasn't lost on me. They couldn't afford their own place, but were planning to serve premium poultry to their guests in my dining room. Sounds expensive, I said, testing the weight of his response. Well, yeah, but it's an investment. The word investment made my jaw clench. Jennifer's parents haven't visited since the wedding, and we want to make a good impression. Show them we're doing well. Doing well. With my house, my furniture, my utilities, my everything. They were going to use my life as a prop in their little theater of success. Where exactly am I supposed to sit for this dinner? I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the squirrel chattering outside. Marcus was calculating, trying to find the right words to make their plan sound reasonable. What do you mean? He finally asked, but his tone was too casual. He knew exactly what I meant. 12 people, Marcus. I only have seating for 8 in the dining room. I walked back to my workbench, setting the hammer down with deliberate precision. Oh, right. Well, we figured you might be more comfortable eating in the kitchen anyway. You know, less formal. Jennifer's parents can be a little stuffy. The words hit me like a physical blow. Less formal. They wanted to exile me to the kitchen like hired help while they entertained their guests in my dining room. In my mind, I could see it clearly. Jennifer's parents admiring their house, Derek making jokes about the authentic blue-collar aesthetic, everyone toasting to Marcus and Jennifer's bright future, while I ate alone at the counter like some elderly relative they were too polite to put in a home. I see, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Dad, don't make this weird. It's just easier this way. Jennifer's stressed enough about the dinner as it is. Jennifer's stressed. About cooking in my kitchen, serving guests in my house, playing hostess with my possessions while I watched from the sidelines. The audacity was breathtaking. I need to go, Marcus. Dad, wait. I hung up, staring at my phone like it had just delivered news of a death. In a way, it had. The death of whatever illusions I'd been clinging to about my son's character. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. The cheerful tone made my stomach turn. Hope you don't mind, but I borrowed your good china to do a table setting test. Wanted everything to be perfect. My good china. The set Sarah and I had received as a wedding gift 45 years ago. The dishes we'd used for every special occasion, every holiday, every moment that mattered enough to break out the good stuff. I could see Sarah's face the first time we'd used them, her careful hands washing each piece by hand because the dishwasher might chip the delicate edges. I walked to the dining room, my footsteps echoing differently in the space. It felt hollow now. I opened the china cabinet, my hands shaking slightly as I counted the empty spaces. Half the dishes were missing. Jennifer had taken them without asking, like everything else in this house already belonged to her. My phone rang. Jennifer this time. I could hear the manufactured sweetness in her voice before she even spoke. Frank, I hope you got my text. I just wanted to make sure the turkey platter would work with the table runner I ordered. You took my dishes. The words came out flat, matter of fact. I borrowed them, for planning purposes. There was a slight edge now, like I was being unreasonable for questioning her actions. I'll bring them back before dinner, obviously. Obviously. Like it was obvious that she could walk into my house and take whatever she wanted, like my possessions were community property in this new world order they'd constructed without my consent. Where are they now? I asked, already knowing the answer would make me angrier. At our apartment. She paused, and I could practically hear her switching tactics. Look, I know this is hard, but we're trying to create something beautiful here. something that honors family traditions while also making space for new ones. New traditions, like exiling the patriarch to the kitchen, like stealing his dishes to set a table he wasn't invited to join. Her words were wrapped in therapy speak, the kind of language people use when they want to make selfishness sound enlightened. And if something breaks, I asked, thinking of Sarah's careful hands, her pride in those dishes. Nothing will break, Frank. I'm very careful with nice things. Nice things. My things. Sarah's things. The casual possessiveness in her voice made something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't borrowing, this was inventory. She was cataloging what would soon be hers. After we hung up, I sat in my empty dining room, looking at the gaps in my china cabinet like missing teeth. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like ghosts. This wasn't planning anymore. This was pillaging. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I'd memorized. Patterson Residence. This is Margaret Chen's office. Miss Chen, this is Frank Patterson. We met last week about the property transfer documents. Of course, Mr. Patterson. How can I help you? Her voice was crisp, professional. It steadied me. I need to know my legal options if someone is removing property from my house without permission. Are we talking about family members? My son and daughter-in-law. They've taken dishes. They're having packages delivered here, and they're planning to host a dinner party in my home without my explicit consent. Saying it out loud made it sound even worse. Miss Chen was quiet for a moment, and I could hear papers rustling. Mr. Patterson, do they have keys to your residence? I gave them keys for emergencies. The word emergency echoed in my head. Apparently, everything was an emergency to them, except actually asking my permission. I see. And have you asked them to return the items they've taken? They call it borrowing. But you didn't give permission for this borrowing? No. The simple word carried the weight of all my frustration. Then it's not borrowing, Mr. Patterson. It's theft, small-scale family-related theft, but theft nonetheless. The word hung in the air between us. Theft. My son was stealing from me. Not just my house, not just my dishes, but my dignity, my authority, my right to exist in my own space on my own terms. After we hung up, I walked through my house with new eyes, not seeing what was there, but what was missing. The small violations, the casual thefts, the steady erosion of my authority in my own home. They thought they were taking over gradually, piece by piece, until I wouldn't even notice I'd lost everything. They were wrong about that. I noticed everything, and I was keeping score. The week before Thanksgiving, Jennifer showed up unannounced while I was reading the morning paper. I heard her key in the lock before I saw her, arms full of shopping bags and that determined look she gets when she's on a mission. "Morning, Frank," she called out, not waiting for an invitation to enter. The casual use of my house key made my teeth clench, but I kept my expression neutral. Amazing how someone could make entering your own home sound like a favor they were doing you, Jennifer. I folded my newspaper carefully, watching as she bustled around my living room like she owned it, which, in her mind, she probably did. "I brought fabric samples for the dining room curtains," she announced, spreading swatches across my coffee table. The same coffee table where Sarah used to do crossword puzzles on Sunday mornings. "I'm thinking something lighter, more modern. These heavy drapes are so dated. Dated. The curtains Sarah had sewn by hand, matching them perfectly to the wallpaper we'd chosen together during our second year in the house. I watched Jennifer dismiss 40 years of my wife's work with a single word, and something cold settled deeper in my chest. The casual cruelty of it, not malicious, just thoughtless, somehow made it worse. "Those curtains are fine," I said quietly, my hands gripping the newspaper tight enough to crinkle the pages. "Oh, Frank." She gave me that pitying smile I'd grown to hate, the one that said I was a confused old man who needed managing. "I know change is hard, but trust me on this. I have an eye for design. Marcus always says I could have been an interior decorator." Marcus says a lot of things, I thought, most of them lately, about what belonged to whom and who deserved what. I stood up, moving to the window where those dated curtains framed the view of the maple tree I'd planted when Marcus was born. Through the fabric Sarah had chosen because it let in just enough light without fading the furniture. "The curtains stay," I said, my back to her. I heard her sigh, That theatrical sound she makes when she thinks someone is being unreasonable. The same sigh she'd made when I'd questioned the cost of her boutique venture, when I'd suggested they might want to save money on their honeymoon, when I'd asked if they really needed a $300 blender. Well, we can discuss it later. I also brought paint chips for the kitchen. Something warmer, more inviting. I turned around to find her holding up color samples against my kitchen wall. Sage green, buttercream yellow, colors that would erase every trace of the soft blue Sarah and I had painted together the summer before she got sick. The same blue she'd chosen because it reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen back in Ohio. No, I said. No what? Her tone sharpened, like she wasn't used to hearing that word from me. No paint. No curtains. No changes. Each word came out precise and final. I could feel my pulse in my temples, steady and strong. This is still my house, Jennifer. Her face went through several expressions: surprise, irritation, then a calculating look I'd seen before. She set down the paint chips and folded her hands over her belly in that protective gesture that had become her favorite weapon. Frank, I understand this is emotional for you. Her voice took on that reasonable tone people use when they're trying to manage you, like I was a child having a tantrum. But we need to think about what's best for the baby, for the family. We can't live in a museum forever. A museum. That's what she called the home Sarah and I had built together. The place where we'd raised Marcus, where we'd celebrated every birthday and anniversary, where Sarah had taken her last breath in our bedroom upstairs, all of it reduced to dusty artifacts that needed to be cleared away for their convenience. You don't live here, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building behind my ribs. Not yet, but not ever. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. They hung in the air between us like a challenge. Jennifer's mask slipped completely. Gone was the sweet daughter-in-law act, replaced by something sharper, more familiar. The real Jennifer, the one who'd criticized my cooking at family dinners and posted photos of my house on social media like it was already hers. Frank, you're being ridiculous. Marcus and I are trying to build a future here. You can't expect us to live in the past forever. The past. Like my marriage, my memories, my life in this house were ancient history that needed to be swept away for their convenience. I looked at this woman standing in my living room, surrounded by her fabric samples and paint chips, planning to erase my wife from our home. Get out, I said quietly. What? She blinked, genuinely surprised. Probably the first time anyone had ever told her no about something she wanted. Get out of my house. I walked to the front door and opened it, feeling the cold November air rush in. Take your samples and your plans and get out. Frank, you're overreacting. Now. The word came out like a command, and for once, she listened. Something in my tone must have reached her because she started gathering her things, but the wounded act was already beginning. Her movements became theatrical, martyred, like she was the victim in this scenario. I was just trying to help, to make this place nice for everyone. This place is already nice. It's been nice for 43 years without your help. I stood by the open door, watching her stuff fabric samples into shopping bags with exaggerated care. She paused at the door, her hand on her belly again, always the belly when she needed sympathy. What am I supposed to tell Marcus? Tell him whatever you want. It's what you do anyway. After she left, I stood in my living room, looking at the coffee table where she'd spread her plans for my house. One fabric swatch had fallen to the floor, a sterile beige that would have turned my warm dining room into something cold and anonymous. Something that could have been anywhere, belonging to anyone. I picked it up and threw it in the trash, where it belonged. My phone started ringing within the hour. Marcus, of course. I let it ring twice before answering, using the time to settle into my recliner and prepare for whatever version of his anger was coming. Dad, what the hell is wrong with you? His voice was tight with rage, all pretense of politeness gone. Jennifer came home crying. She's trying to help, and you threw her out like some kind of stranger. I could picture the scene. Jennifer playing the wounded victim, maybe even working up some tears for effect. Marcus consoling his pregnant wife, getting angrier with each sob story she fed him. She was planning to redecorate my house without asking me, I said calmly. Our house, Dad. It's going to be our house. The possessiveness in his voice was startling. like he'd already moved past asking and straight into taking. No, it's not. The silence stretched between us, filled with 3 weeks of mounting tension. I could hear him breathing, could almost see him pacing in their apartment, working himself up to whatever ultimatum he'd prepared. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more controlled. The voice he probably used in business meetings when he wanted to intimidate someone. Dad, I've been patient with you. We all have. But this ends now. Sign the papers, or we'll find another way. Another way. The threat was clear enough, hanging in the air like smoke. I thought about the legal documents Jennifer had prepared, the casual theft of my dishes, the packages being delivered to my address. They'd been preparing for war while I'd been hoping for peace. What kind of other way, I asked, though I already suspected I knew. There are procedures for elderly people who can't make sound decisions anymore. Legal procedures. His voice was steady, matter-of-fact, like he was reading from a script he'd practiced. My blood went cold. He was threatening to have me declared incompetent, to take my house and my freedom in one legal maneuver with the court's blessing and his unborn child as justification. You'd do that to your own father? The question came out quieter than I'd intended. I'd do what's necessary to protect my family. The certainty in his voice was chilling. Jennifer's pregnant, Dad. We need stability. If you can't provide that willingly, then we'll have to take other steps. I sat there holding the phone, listening to my son threaten to destroy me, and realized I was finally seeing him clearly. This wasn't the boy I'd raised, the one who used to help me in the garage and bring me lemonade when I worked in the yard. This was a stranger who shared his face, someone who saw me as an obstacle to their ambitions, rather than a father who'd given them everything. I need to think about this, I said, buying time I didn't actually need. You have until Thanksgiving, Dad. After that, things get complicated. The line went dead, leaving me alone with the sound of my own heartbeat and the slow burn of rage building in my chest. I looked around my living room, at the pictures of Marcus growing up, at the furniture Sarah and I had chosen together, at the life we'd built in these walls. They wanted to take it all away. Not just the house, but my dignity, my independence, my right to exist on my own terms. I walked to my desk and pulled out the notepad where I'd been planning Thanksgiving dinner. 3 weeks of careful preparation, of phone calls and arrangements and quiet satisfaction. The menu was simple: turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, all the traditional fixings for a traditional family meal. Time to make some changes. I picked up my pen and started writing a new list. Not a menu this time, but a different kind of preparation. The kind that would teach my son and his wife the difference between taking something and earning it. By the time I finished, I was smiling. Marcus stepped between us, his jaw tight. This is securing our future, the baby's future. You've had your time in this house, Dad. Now it's our turn. Our turn. Like my life was a game with innings and I'd used up all my swings. I remembered the night Sarah died. Marcus hadn't even come to the hospital. Too busy, he'd said. Work conference. I'd held her hand alone while machines beeped around us, and when the nurses asked about next of kin, I'd still defended him. He's a good boy, I'd whispered. Just busy building his life. Your mother loved this house, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Mom's gone, Dad. Marcus's words hit like a physical blow. You can't live in the past forever. Jennifer placed her hand on his arm, a gesture that looked supportive but felt possessive. We're not asking you to leave. We're asking you to be part of the solution. The solution. I was the problem now. The inconvenient old man cluttering up their perfect plan. I walked to the window and looked out at the maple tree I'd planted when Marcus was born. 32 years of growth, its branches now reaching the second-story windows. Some things took time to mature. Others, apparently, never did. I need to think about this, I said. Dad, we need an answer tonight. Marcus's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. The lawyer needs the papers filed by Friday. Tonight. They'd given me until tonight to sign away everything I'd built, everything Sarah and I had dreamed of passing down to our children. I turned back to face them, these strangers wearing familiar faces. Jennifer was checking her phone, already bored with the conversation. Marcus was tapping his foot, impatient to close this deal and move on with his life. I'll give you an answer, I said, walking past them toward the stairs. But not tonight. I climbed each step slowly, feeling their eyes burning into my back. At the top, I paused and looked down at them standing in my foyer, under the chandelier I'd hung when they announced their engagement. "You should be grateful, Dad," Marcus called up after me. "Not everyone gets to simplify their life like this." I closed my bedroom door and sat on the bed Sarah and I had shared for 28 years. The silence felt different now, not peaceful, predatory, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious from this battle I never knew I was fighting. That's when I made my decision. Not the one they expected, but the one they'd earned. Thanksgiving morning arrived, gray and cold, the kind of November day that makes you grateful for warm houses and family gatherings. At least that's what most people would think looking at my kitchen as I stood there at 6 a.m., methodically arranging items on the counter. But I wasn't preparing for a traditional family feast. My phone had been buzzing since dawn, texts from Jennifer about arrival times, last-minute menu changes, reminders about the good china she'd borrowed. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the letter I'd spent 3 days perfecting. 28 drafts until I got the tone exactly right. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m., right on schedule. I opened the door to find Marcus and Jennifer on my porch, arms full of grocery bags and that expectant energy people get before big celebrations. Behind them, a silver sedan was pulling into my driveway. Jennifer's parents, Harold and Patricia, arriving from Portland with their usual impeccable timing. "Morning, Dad." Marcus brushed past me like he owned the place, which in his mind he did. "Hope you're ready for this. Jennifer's been cooking since yesterday." Jennifer followed, already surveying my kitchen with the critical eye of someone planning renovations. "Frank, I brought the turkey. Heritage breed, 22 pounds. It's going to be amazing." I watched them unpack their groceries onto my counters, claiming space like colonists marking territory. The expensive turkey, organic vegetables, artisanal cranberry sauce, all the ingredients for their perfect family dinner. "You know what?" Jennifer said after arranging everything to her satisfaction. "Mez, I think we should go for a walk while the turkey starts. Give it time to come to room temperature. Frank, you can get it in the oven, right? 325 degrees, just like I showed you." Like she'd shown me. As if I hadn't been cooking Thanksgiving dinners since before she was born. "We thought we'd show Mom and Dad around the neighborhood," Marcus added, his arm around Jennifer's shoulders. "Let them see the area. We'll be back in an hour to check on everything." Harold and Patricia had already made themselves comfortable in my living room, critiquing my furniture with the kind of casual cruelty that passed for conversation in their circles. Derek was helping himself to my beer, feet up on my coffee table. "Actually, why don't you all go?" I suggested. "Take Derek too. I'll handle the cooking." They didn't need to be asked twice. Within minutes, they were bundling into coats and heading out the door, chattering about property values and neighborhood amenities and all the improvements they'd make once this became their place. The door closed behind them, and for the first time in weeks, my house was quiet. I looked at the raw turkey sitting on my counter, 22 pounds of expensive, heritage-bred poultry that would never see the inside of my oven. Next to it, Jennifer's carefully planned vegetables lay in neat piles, waiting for preparation that would never come. Instead, I walked to the wine rack in my dining room and pulled out a bottle Sarah had been saving for a special occasion. Chateau Margaux, 1982. Our wedding year. She'd bought it during one of her rare splurges, saying we'd open it when we had something truly worth celebrating. Turned out, we did. I opened the bottle with the corkscrew Sarah had given me for my 60th birthday, poured myself a generous glass, and settled into my recliner, the same recliner Jennifer wanted to replace with something more contemporary. The wine was everything Sarah had promised it would be. Rich, complex, with hints of the life we'd built together in every sip. I closed my eyes and could almost hear her voice, could almost feel her hand in mine as we sat together in this room on countless quiet evenings. "We did good, didn't we, sweetheart?" I said to the empty room. The house seemed to answer back, creaking and settling around me like an old friend agreeing with a well-told story. I spent the next hour walking through every room, wineglass in hand, saying goodbye to 43 years of memories. The bedroom where Sarah and I had loved and fought and dreamed together. The bathroom where I'd held her hair back when the chemotherapy made her sick, the kitchen where she'd taught Marcus to cook scrambled eggs and bake chocolate chip cookies, all of it would belong to strangers soon. But the memories, those were mine forever. By the time I heard car doors slamming in the driveway, I was back in my chair, second glass of wine in my hand, feeling more peaceful than I had in months. The letter sat on the dining room table, exactly where I'd placed it that morning, waiting for the moment that would change everything. The front door burst open, bringing with it the sound of Jennifer's voice, sharp with irritation. "Frank? What's going on? Why isn't anything?" She stopped mid-sentence as she entered the kitchen, taking in the scene. The raw turkey, exactly where she'd left it. The vegetables, untouched. The oven, cold and empty. "Frank?" Marcus's voice carried a note of confusion as he joined her. "Dad, what happened to dinner?" I could hear the others gathering behind them, Harold's deep voice expressing displeasure, Patricia's higher-pitched complaints about the cold, Derek's nervous laughter as he realized something was seriously wrong. "The table's not even set," Jennifer said, her voice rising. "Frank, we have guests. We have family flying in from Portland. This is—" "Actually," I interrupted, rising from my chair with the ease of a man who'd finally found his purpose, "I think you'll find everything you need on the dining room table." They followed me in a confused parade, their expectations crumbling with each step. The dining room table stood empty, except for a single sheet of paper, folded once, sitting at the head of the table where the patriarch should sit, where I should have been sitting, if this were still my house. If these were still my guests, if this were still my family. "What is this?" Marcus asked, but his voice had changed. There was something in my posture, something in the way I stood watching them, that made him wary. "Your Thanksgiving dinner," I said simply. "Everything you came here to celebrate." Jennifer snatched up the letter, her hands shaking slightly as she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and I watched her face drain of color. "Marcus," she whispered. "Marcus, you need to read this." Marcus took the letter from his wife's trembling hands, and I could see the exact moment the words sank in. His knees went weak, and he had to grip the back of a chair to stay upright. "Dad," he said, his voice barely a whisper. What have you done?" "Read it aloud," I said, settling back into my chair with my wine, "so everyone can understand what they're really thankful for today." And as Marcus began to read, his voice cracking with each devastating word, I found myself smiling. The empty table had never looked more perfect. "Read it aloud," I said, settling back into my chair with my wine, "so everyone can understand what they're really thankful for today." Marcus cleared his throat, his hands shaking as he began. "To my son Marcus and daughter-in-law Jennifer, and to all gathered here today, by the time you read this letter, you will have discovered that the house you planned to claim as your own has been sold." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Derek stopped fidgeting. Jennifer was the first to break, her voice rising to a shriek. "What do you mean, sold? You can't sell the house. We had an agreement." "We had no agreement," I said calmly, watching the panic spread across their faces like spilled wine. "You had assumptions." Marcus continued reading, his voice hollow. "The sale was finalized yesterday, November 27th, to a cash buyer who takes possession December 1st. The proceeds from the sale will be donated to the Sarah Patterson Memorial Foundation." "You're giving our money away?" Patricia gasped, her perfect composure finally cracking. "My money," I corrected, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't expected. "From my house to help families who actually work for what they have." Harold shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward. "This is insane. You can't just give away your son's inheritance." "Watch me," I said. The room erupted into chaos. Jennifer was sobbing about the baby, about their future, about how this couldn't be happening. Harold was shouting about lawyers and legal challenges that would never succeed. Patricia kept repeating, but the baby," like a broken record. Derek was backing toward the door, probably calculating how fast he could escape this disaster. But it was Marcus who cut through the noise, his voice breaking as he finished reading. "The new owners take possession in 4 days. I suggest you use that time to collect any belongings you may have left here and make other arrangements for your lives." "Dad, please," Marcus whispered, dropping the letter like it was on fire. We can work this out. We can. You threatened to have me declared incompetent, I said quietly, and the room went silent again. You were going to steal my house and call it love. Jennifer lunged toward me, her face twisted with rage and desperation. You selfish old man. What about the baby? What about our family? What about the 43 years I gave you everything? I replied, standing up slowly. What about the respect you never showed? What about the gratitude you never felt? Marcus was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe he was. Dad, we're sorry. We didn't mean. Yes, you did. I walked to the coat closet and pulled out my jacket. You meant every word, every threat, every casual dismissal of my life and my work. You just didn't mean to face consequences for it. Where are you going? Jennifer demanded, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Somewhere I won't be a burden to anyone, I said, looking around the dining room one last time. At the table where Sarah and I had shared thousands of meals, at the windows she'd dressed with curtains Jennifer called dated, at the life we'd built together that no one could take away now because I'd given it away first. Harold was fumbling with his phone, probably calling lawyers who would tell him what I already knew. Everything I'd done was perfectly legal. Patricia was comforting Jennifer, who was rocking back and forth like a child. Derek slipped out the door, and Marcus just stood there, holding the letter that had destroyed his world, finally understanding what it felt like to lose something you'd never bothered to earn. 4 days, I said, walking toward the door. After that, you're trespassing. Dad, wait! Marcus called after me, desperation cracking his voice. We can fix this. We can make it right. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the doorknob that I'd turned thousands of times over 4 decades. Some things can't be fixed, son. Some things can only be learned from. I stepped out into the cold November air, leaving behind the screams and the chaos and the hollow shell of what had once been a family. Behind me, I could hear Jennifer wailing about their destroyed future, Harold shouting into his phone, Patricia's high-pitched demands for explanations nobody could give. But as I walked to my car, keys in hand, I smiled, truly happy for the first time in months. You know what the funniest part was? They actually thought they could guilt me into changing my mind. Over the next 4 days, my phone rang constantly. Marcus left voicemails that progressed from anger to bargaining to something that almost sounded like genuine remorse. Jennifer sent text after text about the baby, about family, about how sorry they were and how they'd learned their lesson. But lessons learned under pressure aren't really learned at all. They're just promises made in desperation, forgotten as soon as the pressure lifts. On December 1st, I drove by the house one last time. There was a moving truck in the driveway, and I could see the new owners. A young couple with twin daughters, directing the movers with the careful attention of people who understood the value of what they'd worked to achieve. I'd met them during the closing. Both teachers, married 8 years, saved every penny for 5 years to afford their first home. When they walked through the house, they didn't see outdated curtains or old-fashioned furniture. They saw the craftsmanship in the woodwork, the care in the details, the love that had been built into every room. They were going to keep Sarah's curtains, said the blue reminded the wife of her grandmother's house. Some things are meant to endure. As for Marcus and Jennifer, I heard through my brother Rick that they'd moved in with her parents in Portland. Harold had gotten Marcus a job at his insurance company, entry-level, customer service. A far cry from the executive position he'd expected to slide into after inheriting my house. The pregnancy they'd used as leverage to steal my home ended in miscarriage 6 weeks later. The stress, the doctors said, the shock of losing their expected future. I felt sorry about the baby. That innocent life didn't deserve to become collateral damage in a war about entitlement and respect. But I didn't feel sorry about the rest of it. Here's what I learned in 62 years of life. You can't love someone into being grateful. You can't sacrifice your way into earning respect. And you can't enable someone's bad character and expect them to develop good character. I'd spent 30 years trying to buy my son's love with money, support, and endless second chances. All I'd really done was teach him that love meant giving him whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted it, regardless of whether he'd earned it. Maybe I'd failed as a father. Maybe all those years of bailing him out, of working extra shifts to pay for his wants instead of just his needs, had created the man who thought he deserved my house simply because he'd been born. Or maybe some people are just takers, and no amount of giving will ever be enough. Either way, the lesson was over. The Sarah Patterson Memorial Foundation has helped 19 families so far. New roofs, furnace repairs, wheelchair ramps, electrical work, all the things people need but can't afford when they're working two jobs just to pay rent. Every thank you letter I receive is worth more than any inheritance I could have left to someone who saw my generosity as weakness rather than love. I live in a small apartment now, in a city where nobody knows my story. I work part-time at a hardware store helping people figure out how to fix things themselves. It's honest work, useful work, and at the end of each day, I go home to a space that's entirely mine. Sometimes Marcus calls, less often now, but still occasionally. Usually when he needs something, advice about the job, help with a decision, someone to listen to his complaints about his new life. I listen politely and give him nothing. Not because I'm cruel, but because giving him things he hasn't earned is what got us here in the first place. Maybe someday he'll understand that respect isn't something you're owed by virtue of being someone's child. That gratitude isn't automatic, but has to be earned through your actions and your choices. That family isn't about what you can take from each other, but what you're willing to give without expecting anything in return. Or maybe he won't understand, and he'll spend his life blaming me for his problems instead of taking responsibility for his choices. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. I raised him. I loved him. I gave him everything I had to give. If that wasn't enough to teach him how to be a man of character, then continuing to give wouldn't have changed anything. Some people have to lose everything to learn the value of anything. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them experience the full weight of their choices, even if that someone is your son.